welcome in. This is season 5. This is episode number 36 of the Outlap F1 podcast. As always, we are proud members of the Ship It Studios podcast network, and we are the intrepid 3 who have invaded and then somehow exfiltrated the Austin, Texas area, hopefully all on time. You've got Andy, I've got Cody, and I've got Deanna tonight. Long time no see, folks, but how are we all doing?
Been a whole 4 days. Not even. But yeah, good to see you. It's a great time in Austin, and happy to be back.
I am happily not sunburnt like I should be for how much sun we sat in. But yeah, just getting back into the humdrum swing of things, and yeah, wishing the next race was here already.
Yeah, part of me wanted to go back, especially like, and we'll talk about this when we get into it, but the city of Austin just did a great job with like all the hospitality and stuff. And then you get back to here and you expect that same type of thing and it just doesn't happen. And it's like, God, dang it. You know, we're back to reality, literally more ways than one. But anyway, if you're here for the first time, welcome. As David Croft would say, welcome along. You can find our show on Twitter or X, Instagram, Discord, Reddit, and of course YouTube at Outlap F1 Podcast is the handle. If you're on YouTube and if you like what you're seeing and you like what you're hearing, do us a solid, click the like and the subscribe button. If you're on your favorite podcasting apps, specifically Apple Podcast and or Spotify, a 5-star review also, again, just helps us come up a little bit better in searches. We can get our content to you that much quicker. You can email the show, as always, chatnow@outlapf1.com. We'll take you there. You can go to the website, www.outlapf1. We'll take you there. Just as a continued thank you to our monetary supporters, including Dean Warwick, Yuri Dolchester, Paul Weaver, Quentin Warden, Kevin Kelly, Regan Stanzik, Timothy Brown, and, of course, Jonathan Scott for providing us with monetary support, and able to do things like we did last week, which is our broadcast live from the hotel. So that was all a lot of fun, and we got a little bit creative with where to put everything, but it all worked out in the end. So if you'd like to help promote the show, you can see our link tree in our show notes. $1, $5 to our anchor page, $1, $5, whatever you would like to do, all goes into help getting new equipment. I'm about to invest in some new equipment myself because my normal webcam went kaput. It has no longer survived the trip. That is probably the one thing that didn't survive the trip, but that's okay. We'll get a new one. Again, thanks to all of your support for that. Again, just see our link in our show notes. In terms of people who actually do give us money, the good folks at Manscaped, you can see our code 20% off and free shipping with our code OUTLAP, OUTLAP, all one word. Hard to believe Christmas is only a couple months away, so maybe a good idea for somebody in your family if you're so inclined. And our buddy Vincenzo Landino, who I don't think actually did make it to Coda this past weekend. I didn't see him there, but he's got an F1 shirt line. It's F1 quality merch at not necessarily the F1 quality price. So go ahead and check that out if you are so inclined. All right, so we will start our USGP Spectacular with our headlines of the day. Cody, I'll let you go first. D, and then I'll come in on the end here.
All right. My headline is Fun in the Sun. Had a great time every day that we spent at the track, despite record temperatures for this time of year in the Austin area. And icing on the cake is I got to see Andy go nuts on Sunday as Lando took the lead of the race and led for 20-some laps. So that was fantastic. I also am inspired now. I think I need to get a picture of Horses in Love to put in the background instead of the butterflies.
Yes, we will always remember. You know, the fun thing was I was looking because it's of just the nature of the hotel, you couldn't help but not see into the room. It's an embassy suites. That's how they're set up. So I was looking and I saw that same picture in a lot of other rooms. So they really did like the horses that were in love as a theme throughout the hotel. But D, what you got for headline?
I think mine is just like happy to be back. And this is the first F1 race I've been to since Austin in 2021. And I just forgot how much fun it is to be in person. And it was fun to be behind Andy a couple rows back and see his reaction to Norris taking the lead that first lap. And once again, I think me and my dad who came with me are very, very appreciative. And thank you for the tickets and helping us get there once again. But yeah, it's just a great time. it's so fun to see those cars and the pit stops and everything in person and see how into it all of the fans are. And it was just a great weekend.
Nicer
Yeah.
being in
Okay,
heats than GA.
Yes, much better than GA. This was an elevated experience. Cannot recommend more.
Yeah, well, we joined. What was it? Over 150,000 a day of our closest F1 friends. Many of them who were in
Yes.
GA and managed to get through it pretty much good. Didn't see a whole lot of complaints, which is a good thing. So kudos, Coda. I thought they did a wonderful job this weekend. It looks like they've learned from a lot of the mistakes or
Other
pitfalls
than
that they
Lot
did.
G. But mysterious
fair.
Lot G is
That's
the only complaint.
Yeah.
Other than that, you're good.
Yep. So my headline is, it was a bit of a whack-a-mole weekend where we all managed to come together in spite of life, jobs, random rocks on the highway, and everything else. But we still managed to have an amazing USGP experience together. So, I think that pretty much summarizes our weekend kind of in a nutshell. We did have Cody and I did have a bit of an unfortunate experience with a Texas-sized rock that left a bit of a Texas-sized dent in our windshield. So we literally had to go swap out our rental car, but kudos to the good folks at Hertz. Looks like they've handled it all on their end. They got us in a new car. Literally, we did like a pit stop right on our way to the track. So it was all good. The second car was actually better than the first car. So it all worked out. So we were actually really good. All right. So since this was a sprint weekend, we have a lot of sessions. We're not going to spend a whole ton of time on all of them because I think otherwise this would be a 3-hour show. Maybe some of you would like us to do a 3-hour show. It's been a bit of a week. We're not going to do a 3-hour show. So we're going to quickly try to run through as many of these as we can. We will start with the traditional qualifying on Friday. All right. Going out in P20, our local boy home race in the Williams, that was Logan Sargent. P19 was Lance Stroll, Aston Martin woes continuing. P18, Alex Albon. P17, Fernando Alonso, double Aston Martin out in Q1. Ouch. P16 was Nico Hulkenberg. P15, Daniel Ricciardo making it out of Q1. P14 was Kevin Magnussen. P13 was Valtteri Bottas. P12 was Joe Granu. P11 was Yuki Tsunoda. P10, bit of a struggle for him, first time at Austin, was the McLaren of Oscar Piastri. P9 was Sergio Perez. P8 was Esteban Ocon. P7 was Pierre Gasly. P6, having his final lap time deleted, Max Verstappen in the Red Bull. P5 was George Russell in the Mercedes. P4 was Carlos Sainz. P3, Lewis Hamilton, upgraded Mercedes floor, working very well. P2, Lando Norris in the other McLaren, showing pretty good. And in P1, the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc with a lap time of 1:34.723. All right. All right, Cody, big thoughts on the traditional qualifying from all the way back on Friday, if you can remember.
Well, I got a really good laugh at the track in Q3. The chorus of groans that happened when Max Verstappen provisionally took pole, followed 30 seconds later by the chorus of cheers as his lap time got deleted. It was very funny. You can tell that Max has lost a little bit of popularity lately. Maybe it's due to he's just so dominant and people want to see literally anybody else win. It could be because there's a lot of Checo fans here in the States. We saw a lot of them here at the U.S. Grand Prix, and maybe they want to see Checo do a little better compared to Max. But either way, it was pretty funny. And as we saw further in the weekend, his sixth place didn't really end up mattering too much. But what do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those kind of moments where you just, all of a sudden there he is back on pole. He hadn't had a good lap. He had a lockup into turn one, and you thought you dared hope for a minute that he didn't really go well here. It wasn't great in practice. First practice, you couldn't tell anything from. I mean, let's be honest. Haas, I think, were P5 and P6 in it, so you really couldn't tell anything of really what was going on. But when you got into the Q3 and here's the sharp end, and you just expect Max to just do Max things, and he's not necessarily doing it, but he still managed to pull it out. I think the lap that got deleted was still like 500ths or 5,000ths or something above what Leclerc was able to do. And so, yeah, there's the collective groan, and then you watch the time just boop, disappear. And then the little thing comes up. Kudos to the graphics, actually, that were there. You could actually read them, and it was actually kind of easy to follow. So you saw the lap time get, taken out, and only good for P6.
Yeah, and I think it just at least added something to the weekend, because we all know how dominant Max has been, and even my dad, who is a very, very big Max fan, was like, this is at least add something interesting. Like, Max is not worried about it. He's won everything, and it added something to the weekend where it was a challenge for him, therefore, and we'll talk more about it, and I think kind of the struggles Red Bull had, once again, a kind of bumpy track, and we'll get more into that later, but yeah, it was just nice to kind of see he's not perfect all the time. And that was kind of the only saving grace we could take from it, but it was good to see, and it was a fun qualifying session overall, I think, to watch live, because you kind of had the top guys coming across the line one after the other, and just to see those times topple was a cool experience.
Yeah, you could definitely tell there was, I think this was the first time that I really noticed it, where they have that minimum lap time. So like everybody, instead of queuing on the lap, is queuing in the pit lane and then in the pit exit area, because technically that's not part of the track. So you could still kind of crawl until you got to the second line.
I don't know if it was it Japan or the race before. I think it was Max who held everybody up in the pit lane and was investigated, and once that wasn't penalized, now that's what everybody's been doing, which
Right.
I feel like if you're gonna hold people up, the pit lane feels like the better option versus being on track with people on flying laps, so I'll take it.
Yeah. No, I tend to agree there. But all right, so you put that aside, and then you move into Saturday. And Saturday was kind of its own individual thing. Kind of interesting. The lap times between Friday and Saturday actually got quicker. But all right, here we go. So we will now recap the sprint shootout very quickly. If I can get the sound to do this one more time. We'll rewind it to the beginning. And all right, once again, going out in P20 theme a bit. At least for the start of the weekend, but it gets better for him. We promise. The number 2 of Logan Sargent in the Williams. P19, Yuki Tsunoda. P18, Valtteri Bottas. P17, Kevin Magnussen. P16, Nico Hulkenberg. The Haas upgrades not looking very promising, at least in qualifying. P15, Joe Gran Yu. P14, Lance Stroll, a little bit better. P13, Esteban Ocon. P12, Fernando Alonso. Again, for both Aston Martins, it was a wee bit better. P11, I thought one of the stars of this session, Daniel Ricciardo in the AlphaTauri, almost making it to Q3. The top 10 from 10 to 1. P10, Pierre Gasly. Good overall weekend for the Alpines. P9, Alex Albon. P8, George Russell. P7, Sergio Perez. P6, Carlos Sainz. P5, Oscar Piastri, making up for the Friday running. P4, Lando Norris. P3, Lewis Hamilton. P2, Charles Leclerc, once again at the sharp end. And in P1, got it right this time, Max Verstappen in the Red Bull with lap time 1:34.538. All right. Big thoughts from the sprint shootout?
Pretty much saw a little bit of development over Friday. We started to get a little nervous about those McLarens because Norris wasn't quite up as high as he was on Friday. But yeah, still good to see Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton, Lando Norris all in those first couple rows. Seemed kind of more like business as usual this time with Max coming out on top. But yeah, overall, decent session. I'm still not a huge fan of the sprint shootout rules, and I think we ended up, hearing a lot of this weekend about how some stuff with the sprint format might need a change for the sake of keeping it interesting and competitive going forward. But overall, I thought it was a good enough session. Good lead into the sprint later in the day.
Yeah, I think maybe just kind of a weird overall theme of the weekend was the difference between the quote-unquote number 1 and number 2 drivers in each team. Like Max Perez, that's a very clear difference, but to see Leclerc and Sainz, they were on a whole different page. Hamilton, Russell, completely different. Norris, Piastri, this was the only session they were mildly close. It was the top 5 teams were definitely cleared away ahead of the top 5 teams, which was also a bigger difference than I think we've had, but to also have each individual driver within each team be so far ahead of their teammates was also bizarre. I don't know if it was just necessarily this track and the way that each driver adapts to this track, but I don't know. I think kind of seeing that over the course of the weekend was a little bit bizarre. I don't know if there is an explanation, if you have any ideas, Andy. But yeah, I think that at this point, you can kind of see that happening at the end of the result of the sprint session or qualifying.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that this was probably the much more refined version of the qualifying. Had you had your traditional session, this is probably how I would have said most of it probably would have lined up. Big thing for me, the top 4 drivers separated by a tenth of a second. When was the last time you saw that in qualifying? I mean, Verstappen 134.538, Leclerc 34.593, Hamilton 34.607, Norris 34.639. That's really close. It's down to the margins. And that's why I think, I think that's why you're seeing the more experienced drivers in basically all of these 4 teams eking it out just that little bit because it was that much on the margin. It's a tough track to tame. You know, this is not an easy thing. You've got multiple different surfaces because they patched certain parts of the track. Certain parts are bumpier. Other parts are almost, you know, really, really still pretty smooth. And there are some bumps that move around just because of what happens around Circuit of the Americas during the year, and the fact that it's 110 in the shade for 6 months out of the year doesn't help the tarmac at all. So, but yeah, I mean, I thought for what this was, as quick as we get in and get out of it, we got, I think, the result I think we needed to see, and it was a fun little session. Unfortunately, it didn't carry too much. We're not going to talk all that much about the sprint. I think pretty much this was the part of the weekend that everyone would have rather deleted. For one thing, it was 3.5 hours after the sprint shootout. The sprint shootout happens in the heat of the day, and it was quite toasty during that sprint shootout. And then the sprint isn't until like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, which was actually a little bit better to watch maybe as a fan because the sun had at least gone behind us and, you know, went away at least for a good chunk of it, but it didn't add to the racing. So this was kind of interesting. So I'll just kind of take you through the top 20 here. Lance Stroll did not finish. So he gets the non-classified result here. P19 Logan Sargent, P18 Kevin Magnussen, P17 was Joe Granu, P16 Valtteri Bottas, P15 was Nico Hulkenberg, P14 Yuki Tsunoda, P13 was Fernando Alonso, P12 Daniel Ricciardo, P11 Esteban Ocon, P10 Oscar Piastri, P9 was Alex Albon, and now the points finishers, P8 George Russell, P7 Pierre Gasly, P6 Carlos Sainz, P5 Sergio Perez, P4 Lando Norris, P3 Charles Leclerc, P2 Lewis Hamilton, and in P1 just kind of drove away in this one, Max Verstappen in the Red Bull. Not a whole lot of difference from the qualifying order, if I'm being honest. So, yeah, not necessarily maybe the good track for overall race, not necessarily the best track for a sprint.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Go ahead.
I think, Andy, you said it while we were there. Luckily, typically, this boring sprint typically leads to an interesting race, and we at least got that. But yeah, it was easily the worst sprint of the year, and we can talk about it more. But I think, especially after this weekend, sparked a ton of conversations about what else can we do with the sprint race moving forward. Because it was just kind of, once we got going, everybody stayed in the same place. There wasn't a lot of movement, and that was just where we ended.
Yeah, it was definitely a bit dry for a sprint. It was also a little bit of an ill omen for Sunday because Max started out in front in this one and drove away to finish over 9 seconds in front of Lewis Hamilton by the end of that short 19 laps. So made us all a little nervous for what was going to come on Sunday, no matter where Max was going to start. Yeah, I mean, I thought it was still a lot of fun. But the best part of where we sit is, you know, we're sitting right at the start line. So the fact that we get that twice is fantastic. Yeah. Like, that's the best part of the race for me is the start, and we got 2 starts. So, but that was pretty much the best part of the sprint race. Didn't get much better than that.
Yeah, I'd say the best part for me was like the half an hour right when they open the pit lane, because you see all the cars come out, they go to do the recon laps. Everybody's getting all the stuff set up on the grid to watch the mechanics operate, to watch the drivers go through their pre-race prep. This didn't have the huge, celebrity filled grid because it was pretty much just the business end. They just all kind of wanted to get on with it. Beyond that, once the lights went out and we got past turn one, Verstappen makes a move against Leclerc, forces him way to the inside. Leclerc concedes the position. That was pretty much all she wrote for the sprint. Everybody else pretty much just held station. Just not good. Not a good look, at least for the sprint, when you try to build that up to your day. But D, you mentioned it. A lot of people trying to put in their 2 cents. And the other thing is, being a back-to-back sprint, I think, I always look at it like, sometimes like, hey, look, I sometimes like a donut, but I don't want to eat donuts every meal all the time. That would get really bad, and it's bad for you. And that's kind of how I feel about the sprint, where like once every 5-6 races, okay, I can get up for that. That's fine. But when you do them back to back and you're going to have 3 out of 4, I mean, we're going to go to Mexico. We're not going to have it. Then we're going to go to Brazil. And we're going to do this all over again. It gets, you see where the flaws are at least in this machine. The sprint race, particularly here, definitely being it. So I'll just throw it open. If you had a magic wand and could fix the sprint format, what would you do and how would you do it?
I think for me, and I think a lot of the ideas that have been thrown out, which, I mean, a lot of this has been an experiment, so I would like to kind of see, ideally, us try something in Brazil, and then we try something next year, and then we kind of see what works. But I like the idea of a reverse grid championship order, and then we at least get rid of, I mean, some people have differing opinions, but that one more competitive session of the sprint qualifying, we give them another practice session. We don't put in cars in park for May right after quali. I think that'll mitigate issues like we had this weekend, which we will talk about again moving forward. Probably save a little bit more money and development, things like that for the teams. But I think that reverse quali or reverse grid and make it be a completely different championship. I think you make it a driver led, because the constructors and everything that's in the race, that's for the constructors. The money and the prizes are for the constructors. You make it let's call it $1 million, $2 million, whatever, for the drivers, and that is their own personal incentive to go after those points. I think that is just like it's just very clearly different from the race. It gives some people incentives. It at least allows some of the backmarker teams to feel like they have something to go for. And then, I think it's just something separate and something different, and we feel like we're kind of in 2 different events at the same track in one weekend versus this like mini weird third of a Grand Prix. We kind of know what's going to happen before it actually happens, kind of thing.
I do like the idea of the reverse grid. I think a good way to do it would be to take a page out of what they were doing with F1 Academy, where the second shorter race, the start order is based on qualifying for the first race, but they do a reverse grid for the top half of the grid only. So if you applied that to F1, if you're making it into Q3, you would get the benefit of starting at the front if you're at the bottom of Q3. But if you qualify poorly, outside of Q3, you're not going to get that benefit. You're still going to be starting farther back. I think that would be a good middle ground for spicing it up for doing the reverse grid, but not completely. I also do agree that there needs to be more incentive to make the sprint races more interesting, because everyone pretty much just tries to keep the car on the track. There's no risk involved. I think so. Yeah, I've seen some ideas floated around, like monetary incentive for the drivers on a sprint by sprint basis, more points awarded, to more drivers throughout the sprint. Something that Andy and I had discussed during the weekend too is the possibility of, for the sprint race only, you use an even softer compound of tire than what's allowed for the Grand Prix. So, Pirelli makes their pick, say, like C2, C3, C4, like they did for the US Grand Prix. But then for the sprint race, you do one softer compound beyond. It almost forces the drivers to have to take a pit stop, even though it's such a short duration. and you have everyone starting on super soft, so lots of grip, makes it really interesting at the start. I think that would be another interesting approach, and drivers and teams won't have data on that tire because they probably wouldn't be using it during regular qualifying, because that's going to be based off of the tires you're going to be using in the Grand Prix. So yeah, there's definitely a million ways you could do it to make it more interesting. I'm not totally against sprints, but yeah, they can definitely refine the quality a little bit.
Yeah, so I'll try to take what I think the best bits off of both of those and kind of combine them. Because I actually like a lot how MotoGP does it. I know that they do it every weekend, and I think that that's probably not the best approach. But for what they do, it's not bad. So what I would do is I would make Friday, again, you got to give these guys some help with these Parc Fermé rules. You can't expect an hour, especially with all these teams that brought all these upgrades, to calibrate everything perfectly, and then they're locked in and they can't do anything. Because you saw when we get to Sunday, you're going to have 4 guys taking the cars out of Parc Fermé anyway because they said, oh, screw it. We're not going to do anything unless we do this. So as opposed to, it's almost like the same thing that you see with engine penalties. At some point, everybody just says, well, we're just going to take our engine penalty here. Why? Because we think we can overtake and we can make it better. Well, that doesn't help either. But so what I would do, FP1, same way as it is. FP2, what I would do is a bit of what MotoGP does, where they take like the top 10 times, and guess what? You're locked into sprint Q2. Okay, so you're already in that sprint Q2. All you do, your sprint qualifying is 2 sessions, sprint Q1, sprint Q2, where you take your bottom 10, you have them go run out for like 15 minutes or whatever you want to give them. Only one set of tires, and the top 2 advance into that SQ2. So they'll join the top 10, or you make it 8 that becomes 10, however you want to do it. You can split it however you want. But you take those top 2 and they come in, and then everybody does SQ2. That lines up your sprint. I still think you have that building throughout. I don't mind your idea of a reverse grid, if you wanted to try something like that. But I think that would be more of a natural build. You'd give these guys a little bit more setup. Your Parc Fermé wouldn't come in until that Saturday morning qualifying is done. And that's where I would work from there to try to at least make the general thing. I like your idea, Cody, about the soft tire, trying to basically almost force a pit stop, because I think that's a big part of a race in general that you just don't get to see, because, everybody locks in on one tire, and that's kind of the end. But anyway, I'm sure this is a topic that will be debated amongst the circles for a long time. I don't know that we have all the answers, but we've laid some out of what we would do. And feel free to comment if you like or dislike any of our ideas. That's perfectly fine. But anyway, we will now move into the Sunday show, the actual the tasty bits, which turned out to be quite a very entertaining race. Now, we're going to preface this. It had no yellow flags. It had no safety car. It had no virtual safety car. But it was still damn fun and damn entertaining to do. So we will start with our back markers, and we have 3 non-classified finishers here. The 31 of Esteban Ocon went out after he did not finish. The McLaren of Oscar Piastri also went out. He did not finish. They combined on lap 1 to basically take each other out of the race. Fernando Alonso gave it a good go for a while, but he could not bring the car home. So those are your 3 non-classified finishers. P15 was Daniel Ricciardo. P14 was Kevin Magnussen. P13 was Zhao Guan Yu. P12 was Valtteri Bottas. And P11, notice how I'm being a little bit different with the numbering here. We'll talk about that in a little bit. We normally don't get all the way to P11, but that was Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas. All right, the traditional back markers. Thoughts on them?
Well, I was a little disappointed that I was correct that Daniel Ricciardo had kind of a meh first Grand Prix back. He overall did better throughout the entire weekend than I thought he would do. He did, decent in qualifying, and was putting up some good times. But I couldn't really put it together in the Grand Prix. I believe he had some damage to his car too, which was holding him back a little bit. Somebody had damage that was keeping him back there. Also, disappointing to see that the Haas's were still among the back markers, even though they brought those upgrades. They showed promising times in practice, and then when it came down to actually setting times in qualifying sessions and bringing it home during races, they couldn't do it. And yeah, I was hoping to see a little bit more from them at the American race.
Yeah, I think back here, again, as you were saying, disappointing for Haas after the big upgrade. And for Mayo, absolutely nowhere the entire weekend, even after the disqualifications and all the mess that we'll talk about later. And then Aston Martin, Stroll, I think somehow miraculously turned the weekend around, but also that was a gigantic disaster. Running two floors, bringing a new upgrade, not being able to figure that out, not having enough time to figure that out with only one practice, and it was just absolute disaster. Fernando Alonso retired with floor damage, and they just, what is so upsetting about this team, I think, is A, how strong they started out and the dramatic fall that they've had, but also that they do not understand that car at all. They don't understand what their issues are, and I don't think they really understand where to go from here. So I think they've, in the past, back in Racing Point, they were the pink Mercedes. I think this year they came out as the green Red Bulls, and I just don't think they really have a great understanding of that car. And I think, unfortunately, as exciting as the beginning of the season was, I don't see them returning to that point anytime soon.
Yeah, it's definitely never a good sign when your top driver says, "I'll take the old car, please."
Yeah.
Yeah, that's bad. So they ended up both Aston Martins and both Haas cars decided to say, screw it to our qualifying positions. It's better to take the cars out of Parc Fermé and actually work on them. And then basically Aston Martin turned it into a test session where they left the upgrades on Lance Stroll's car and took them off and put Fernando Alonso on the old spec. As you said, D, he retires with floor damage. That is something that will become a theme when we go further up. However, the one bit of good news for Aston Martin that I will give you, and I saw this stat as I was, I think, somewhere probably over Missouri as we were flying home. What was it? His race pace was actually within a tenth for a good chunk of that race on Lando Norris in the McLaren, believe it or not. So don't let the starting position necessarily fool you. It might be a ray of hope. It may be fool's gold. I don't know. It is, after all, Lance Stroll that we're talking about, but he at least got something out of a weekend that you wouldn't have expected any other way. So with that, I guess we'll hop into that midfield. Now, at this point, we have to talk about the post-race thing because otherwise none of this makes any sense. So Lewis Hamilton finishes in P2 on the road, and Charles Leclerc finishes in P6 on the road. And that's where their good luck tended to end because we leave, we get in the car, we through the parking lot, we come all the way back to our hotel. I open up my phone just to kind of bask in the post-race glory, and no, we're not done. Post-race issues. Joe Bauer, the technical director, flags Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton's cars as not meeting the floor requirements, referring that to the stewards. And then within about 45 minutes, each team had to send a representative to the stewards. They had a meeting. And then the word finally came down, which is what we were all thinking was going to happen. Out of the race they go. Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton were both DSQ'd. So it basically means as though they never even showed up on Sunday morning. So take Lewis Hamilton out of P2, take Charles Leclerc out of P6. What that ends up doing was oh say can you see, Logan Sargent, the guy who was in the back for every session I've read so far, comes home, had a really good race, came home P12 on the road. He gets promoted to P10. Unbelievable. A U.S. driver in America scores a point, first one since Michael Andretti in the McLaren, I think in 1991. So, wow. Logan Sargent manages to come home in P10, scoring his first point of his career. P9 now means that is now Alex Albon, so double points for the Williams duo. P8 was Yuki Tsunoda. P7 is Lance Stroll, also promoted up with the two DSQs. P6 was Pierre Gasly. P5 is George Russell. P4 is now Sergio Perez, and P3 I know we have to talk about podium, but he's here. Is Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari? Wow, interesting stuff in the midfield. First off, thoughts on the DSQ? I know we got to talk about kind of the process of what they do, how they select the cars, but prevailing thoughts on that first. Then we'll get into the midfield.
I guess I'll kick off on the DSQs, but so the 4 cars that they ended up investigating were the podium and pole, essentially. So Verstappen, Norris, Hamilton, and Leclerc. Hamilton and Leclerc are disqualified. I fully understand, and I have zero issue with Hamilton and Leclerc getting disqualified. You are under the limit of where the depth of the plank should be.
Yep.
That is a clear breach of the rules. Whatever. Fine, move on. What I don't understand, or there is and I read the published FIA document of the list of all the things that they check. And there's a whole ton of things that they check, and I get that it's a lot to check. And so for some of the things, they only check certain cars over others. So they only check these 4 floors for their plank. I feel like this has come up in discussion, if 50% of the cars checked fail that regulation, we should move on and we should check the entire grid. It also doesn't seem like checking a certain millimeter length on the floors of a car would really take that long. I mean, you have like 4 points on each of the floors for each of the cars. Really, realistically, how long could that take if you have 2 fail? Like, that is, I think, my issue with it. Like, I fully understand the good disqualified, but also, had Sainz gotten checked, had Russell gotten checked, would they have passed that? We don't know. And I think that if I had to venture a guess, it would probably be no, because obviously those teams didn't calculate the effect that the ride height had over the course of the weekend, be that the sprint, be it low practice time and then the sprint, qualifying for both, and the full race. So, like, I can kind of give them a pass not give them a pass, but, like, can see where they got to the point where they wore down too much on that floor, given the bumps on the track was probably more than they anticipated, and the weekend and only gave them 1 practice session. But, like, my frustration lies with, once again, the FIA, as always. I think when you have a 50% fail rate on anything, you should probably check the entire grid. Anyway.
Yeah.
Sampling 101.
Yep.
I learned some new stuff this weekend. I didn't realize that they only checked certain things on certain cars, and only some of the time. Like, I guess they don't actually even check the floor plank at every Grand Prix. I don't believe they checked it in Japan because they didn't think that it was going to be a track where it was going to get worn down a whole lot. So Andy was reading off to me in the hotel room all the things that they check on the cars, and it's like they check this on every car, they check that on every car. They have this huge list of things that they check on every car, and then they got like 1 or 2 things that it's like, yeah, we're going to check it on 4. And I can understand that maybe it's a little more time consuming, and they're just trying to do a spot check pretty much. But I do agree with you that if 50% of them are failing, especially when by one of your drivers getting or by one of those drivers getting disqualified, another car that, if you had checked it, Carlos Sainz's car probably could have been disqualified too, considering Charles Leclerc was, yet he gets promoted to the podium because you're not checking his car. So
that's my other thing. It's like, it obviously was not a random check if you checked 3 podium finishers and the pole sitter. So, like, I feel like you should at minimum check the people that finish on the podium. So I think Sainz should have by default gotten investigated. But
yeah.
Anyway, sorry. Continue.
No, it's all good. I think that they should probably check all of them, like you were saying. That at the very least, if you're during your spot check, you're getting such a high rate of people getting disqualified. At that point, you should probably extend it out to the whole grid and be like, "Whoa, how many of you are actually breaking the rules?" And like you said, probably not going to be as time consuming. I'm sure they've got fancy tools and stuff that they can do and develop to make this go even quicker. If they really wanted to. And I'm sure there's going to be people crying foul that they should check this on every car going forward. So we'll have to wait and see if anything comes out of this. I do agree, though, that, rules are the rules. They did set up the cars in such a way that it wore that plank down to a point of disqualification. So despite, at least a really good performance from Lewis Hamilton, it's disappointing to see him get disqualified. But even Toto Wolff and Mercedes came out and said, yeah, we just kind of got to take that one. That's it's nothing that we can really argue. Floor plank is too worn down. So they seem to be accepting the penalty, disappointing as it is.
Yeah, this is one of those things where I've been stumping for this ever since that fateful November day in Abu Dhabi, where I said, we need to really have a look at the rule book and go back to square one. This screams like one of those things where, like, maybe we were able to cut these corners until now we really can't. Because look at the ridiculous result you end up doing. You basically have a 50% fail rate. I've heard engineer after engineer, some smart people have said, that's way too high of a fail rate. Something's got to be done about that. Now, the other part is you're talking about the sporting regs, which is the big book with little penalties, versus the technical regs, which is the small book full of large, big penalties that happen if they happen to go bad. So, yeah, DSQ, unfortunately, is the only thing they could do once that happens. The only grounds that either Mercedes or Ferrari would have been able to say is they would have been able to have a problem with how the thing was measured. Like if they took it in the wrong thing or the measuring device was calibrated incorrectly, maybe there's something they can appeal. But once that ruling comes down from those stewards, it becomes really hard to reverse. So I get it. There's not enough time to even gather that type of evidence, given the fact that you've got another Grand Prix this weekend. So, yeah, no, I get all of that. But we have to look at what we do post-race here and go, wait a minute, why is this not making sense? Dee, to your point, they obviously knew who they wanted to sample. I refuse to believe that that's a random number generator picking those 4 cars out of the 20. They wanted to look at the top finishers. They wanted to make sure they got a Red Bull. They wanted to make sure they got a Mercedes. They wanted to make sure they got a McLaren. And look, there's the pole sitter as well. Yeah, when this is screaming at you that something is wrong, there may be something wrong here. And you have issues. We've talked about this track. This track is not in the world's greatest shape. They've tried to patch it over the years. It's part of what gives it its character. But at the same, and it's the same for everybody. So, I mean, yeah, were there teams that probably got away with something here? Yeah, more than likely. But if you're the FIA here, you got to look at this and you got to say, okay, should we hire more staff? Can we spend a little more extra money to try to make this right so that we can get through our post-race tech and still be practical? Seems like you ought to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time here.
Or, like, they check, I mean, we both looked at this gigantic list of things where they check every single car. I don't know, maybe cut down half of those to half the grid and bump up those other things where you only check 4 cars to half the grid.
Yeah.
And then I think you're getting, at least, if you're at least checking 1 car of each of the teams, I think you're getting a decent sample versus just these smaller ones. And that might cut down a little bit of time, minimum.
Yeah, I mean, you got to find a way, basically, to get this right and then still manage time. Because we get it. I mean, the reason that they're all saying is, look, there's not enough time to do it the way we have it set up now. And we got to get up and go. We got to get these cars broken down. They got to get out of park for May. Got to give them back to the teams. They got to break them down, break the garages down, move on to the next race. But again, like I was saying, you got to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. But anyway, all right. So we will move into now our official podium. Well, podium as it was on the road. Promoted now to P2. My boy in the McLaren, Lando Norris, with the start of his life, which I will talk about in just a little bit. P2 on the road was Lewis Hamilton, who had himself, believe it or not, in spite of the DSQ, a really good race. And if you're a Mercedes fan, you now have hope because that floor upgrade appeared to work right out of the box. But he's Thanos. He's inevitable. Max Verstappen in the Red Bull. It just doesn't seem to matter where you put him on the grid. P6 to P1. He ends up coming home, taking the win. But he was challenged. This was not easy. This was not your typical. You can look at the result and go, oh, well, that's normal. If you watch this race, it was anything but. But I'll open it up to the floor first. Thoughts on the podium?
It was very exciting, despite it being a Max Verstappen win, because we didn't think for the entire race that he was going to win it. We thought for the first half of the race, at least, that Lando Norris maybe had a chance at winning it. We thought as we got further to the end of the race, after I had decided like Max has this in the bag, suddenly Lewis Hamilton is starting to creep back up on him. And he only finished a couple seconds behind him at the end. A few more laps or a few things going differently during the race. Like Lewis Hamilton got held up by Norris on track, trying to take that position away from him. He lost about a second to Verstappen during that battle. And I really do think that had that not happened and had there been maybe 2 more laps, Hamilton could have easily been in DRS of Max and could have really had it on for a win. In hindsight, maybe a good thing that didn't happen, because had Lewis Hamilton gotten the winner's trophy and then got disqualified, holy crap, people would have been rioting at the track, or whatever was left there. It would have been bad. So I guess it works out in the end that he got disqualified from second place instead. But like you said, really promising showing from Hamilton and Mercedes. It looks like they are becoming even more competitive and ready to bring the fight to Red Bull.
Yeah, so I mean, this was easily the best green flag race we had all year, and I'm very happy we were all there to witness it in person. Although my 2 things, Hamilton, I think them and Mercedes probably could have won that race. Had they not thought the one stop was a possibility. I do not know, and I was pit in my stomach the second McLaren said it and when Mercedes said it. One-stop strategies, I don't believe, have ever really worked at Coda. We have watched them fail time and time again. Like, it was not the winning strategy. I understand trying to do something different than Max, but you do not have the life in the tires. I don't care how much of a tire whisperer you are not doing it at this track. I'm so sorry. So I was happy when Norris bailed. I think had Hamilton, they were trying, he made it to lap 20 versus Verstappen, I think, pitted on lap 16. But, like, had they pitted on lap 18, gone from that stop there, and then pitted after, I think the ideal strategy here is the 2-stop, but to also have the offset on the end to overcut each time, so you have the tires at the end because you can overcut on the strategy, which I think is what they were doing, but they just were off a couple laps, and they could have done it, and I think they were only 2.2 seconds behind, so had you had a couple laps on better tires, that probably would have helped. And B, I think Mercedes, and I saw the graphic this weekend, their pit stops, absolute disaster compared to McLaren and Red Bull. And I think he lost, compared to his own teammate, he lost a second in the pit stops. So, like, you add in those kind of two little factors, and I think that makes up the 2.2 seconds. He's in DRS, he at least has a chance. So I think that was like one thing that was Mercedes could have had a chance even with their lower height disqualification. We at least could have seen like a very, very real battle at the end, which is a very, very big and real step up for Mercedes. But I think similar to Singapore, the issues that Red Bull had were in the slight vulnerabilities that they do have were apparent on this track. It is bumpy. They have to ride that car a little bit higher, and it just doesn't work the same way as it does. That car wants to be as low as humanly possible, and they just couldn't do it the way that they normally do, and they didn't do it, and they didn't get a penalty for it either, and they rode the wire where it needed to be, and I just don't think that its car at its best. Plus, they had the brake issue, etc., etc., so I still don't think this is a full-strength Red Bull by any stretch of the imagination, but it was a lot of fun to see a green flag race this year that was so close, and it was refreshing, and I'm very happy we were there in person to see that.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm sitting. It's like 6 o'clock in the morning, and the sun's just starting to come up, and I'm kind of envisioning what I would like to see from Lando in P2 there, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, he's got to start on the inside, he's got to get past Leclerc, get up to him, ride the inside, and then if he can get through turn 1 clean, he's got to do 4 or 5 qualifying laps of his life to break that DRS. And lo and behold, if it doesn't happen almost exactly how I envisioned it, it was amazing. Like it was like something out of a Twilight Zone. Like he manages to do it, and he manages to pull like 4 seconds within the first 5 laps. I'm like, this may actually freaking happen. Like, I don't know how this is going to happen, but this may actually happen. And he gets through the first stint, and he cycles back to the lead, and he's still there. But then you could just see over the stretch of the stint, the tire life just isn't there on the McLaren yet. You know, we talked about this when they were in Hungary. They can be elite for the first 9 or 10 laps on a stint, and they can match Red Bull almost point per point, and they were doing that. But it just doesn't match throughout the life of that tire, and that's where the Red Bull still has the inherent advantage on everybody else in that field. And yeah, you know, maybe if Lando defends a little bit harder from the lead, you know, Max came from way back going into turn 12 and looked like he surprised him. Maybe it's a different story. Who knows? You know, the move against Hamilton late, you know, for Lando, you know, that was, I think, good, hard, aggressive racing. I think it was on the limit, but, you know, no harm, no foul. Nobody ended up touching each other. So that ended up being okay. Probably destroyed whatever life Lando had left in his tires. And at that point, he was just trying to get the car to come on home. But yeah, what could have been for the first 27 laps, I was absolutely ecstatic. You guys got to all see what happens when I kind of lose my stuff. Yeah, I'm going to have the image of him coming around on lap 1 in the lead right in front of me, basically for the rest of my life, because that was just an amazing moment. That's just going to be codified, you know, for me. So that was the moment of my weekend. That's been kind of the moment of my year, other than maybe the British Grand Prix where he ended up taking the lead. But yeah, it was fun. Cody's got it on camera where I'm just absolutely losing it. My camera shot, I completely screwed up. Like, the shot is fine until I go to turn, and then because I'm so excited, my camera's just way too high and I can't see anything. So it's just the camera shaking and me kind of losing my brain. But at some point we'll get that up on our social media. We'll get the different angles of the race start for you so you can kind of see what it was from our perspective. But yeah, I mean, but even just so, even with Max taking the win, this was a fun race. It was an intense watch. Nobody wanted to move. That's what you want from a Formula One race. I mean, for the hour and 35 minutes that this thing went, it had our attention all the way through. And it was dang fun to be there.
Can I say something, because we haven't touched on it? Again, 1,000% fully agree. That was an awesome race to be there live for. But I just, because they ended up on the podium and we haven't talked about them yet, Ferrari, this team, I just want, I have never had the patience for Ferrari, but like, they have such a good driver lineup. Like, I want them to do well. But why on earth, poor Charles Leclerc, do we try to put them on a one-stop strategy when they have literally the worst car for tire dead maybe ever? Like, who thought that was a good idea? And so this poor man drops from pole to 6th and then gets disqualified on top of that. And then Carlos Sainz, for the 3rd time, unprecedented, gets a podium post-race.
With no circumstance.
And should also probably be disqualified, if we're really honest. And it's just such chaos over there. And like, people need to get fired again. And it's just, I just don't get it. I don't get it. Like, they have so much money and so many resources, and this is what we get constantly.
Even without I didn't even really realize that Ferrari was trying that with Leclerc at first, but we heard, you know, on the announcements that they were going to be trying potentially a one-stop for Norris and Hamilton. And Andy and I look at each other and we're like, really? It's hot. It's really hot out. I don't know if that's a good idea. And, you know, to their credit, they eventually gave up on that. Maybe they were just trying to see if they could pull it off, and they eventually saw the data come through and they were like, nah, we're not going to try it. But yeah, Ferrari decided they were going to stick to their guns, and they're like, nope, we put you on a one stop, you're going to stick to it. And yeah, I remember during the race when Sainz passed him by, kind of winced a little bit, being like, oh, that sucks so bad.
One of my more favorite tweets from the weekend was somebody goes, I would love to see what happens when Ferrari sticks to their plan A. Like, I don't think we've ever seen it.
Just whatever it is.
They were asking Leclerc, like, do you want to stay with D or do you want to go back to C? And he was like, at this point, like, who cares?
Yeah.
Like, it's just...
we're on plan F, which is we fucked it yet again.
Yeah.
Ay.
It's just, like, it's so crazy, because all of these strategists that they employ, I think across all of these F1 teams, are vastly smarter than I could ever dream of being. But the Ferrari team, like, I literally can sit there and I believe that I fully believe in myself that I can make a better decision than half of these people. And it's just like, come on, a little bit of common sense, please. I beg you. Anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean, the only thing I can think of is that nobody had really run a lot of the hard tires. So, they were all kind of basing it kind of on the sprint. Ferrari was also the only guys in the sprint. We didn't talk about this because the sprint was really boring, but the one interesting thing out of it was Carlos Sainz was the only guy who tried to run a soft tire. And he kind of got it there. It didn't work, but he got it there. And I think that probably gave them that false sense. Well, if we put him on the medium or the hard and we got Carlos to maybe eke out the soft for 18 laps, maybe we can do this. Maybe, let's try it. What else do we got to lose? That's all I can really think of. I'm trying to make it made no sense. It made absolutely no sense based on what was being seen in the DEG and the data. You're absolutely right. But that's the only logic I can try to put to it, was maybe they thought they had something that somebody else didn't.
It's chaos.
All right. All right, I guess that's it. I guess we got to the end. All right, so that is kind of the USGP all done and dusted. So we will take a quick break. We will re-rack really quickly. We will recap where the points are. There are some movement in the point standings in both the drivers and the constructors, especially given the DSQ. I'll tell you one person who's really happy about this, Sergio Perez. He has to be ecstatic that he has some pressure taken off of him, because Lewis would have been bearing right down on him. But anyway, we'll get into all that in just a little bit. We'll open it up to your thoughts in the fan email segment. We'll hand out some awards, talk about what Cody and I thought was going to happen way back when the weekend started. And then we'll get into a little bit of Mexico stuff. We're probably not going to do a full-on Mexico preview, but we'll do enough. We'll throw in some predictions as to what we think we're going to see and set the stage for the Mexican GP. So come on back. Welcome back in. This is Season 5, episode number 36 of the Outlap F1 podcast. It's our USGP race review. You've got the three who were there. You've got Andy, you've got Cody, and Deanna tonight. And we just wrapped up talking about all of the various sessions. There were lots of them. All right, so where all this falls out. Post-disqualification, Cody, tell us where the drivers all sit, and then I'll hop in with the teams.
All right, in first place and going nowhere, already clinching the championship, Max Verstappen. In first place with Red Bull with 466 points. Second place, his teammate Sergio Perez with 240 points. Lewis Hamilton stood to make up some ground on Perez this race, if were it not for that disqualification. It's still possible, though. He is in third place with 201 points. Fernando Alonso, still somehow, despite the Aston Martin falling off, still holding on strong for now to fourth place with 183 points. Carlos Sainz up in fifth place with Ferrari with 171 points. Lando Norris continues to move up in the points and standings now that McLaren has become so strong. He's in sixth place, 159 points. Charles Leclerc in seventh place. Really feel like he should be higher up. Hopefully he will get there one of these days. Seventh place with Ferrari, 151 points. George Russell, eighth place. Pretty big discrepancy there between George Russell and Lewis Hamilton at the moment. He is in eighth with 143 points. Oscar Piastri, ninth place in the other McLaren with 83 points. And Pierre Gasly, I didn't really talk about it, but he had a quiet but very successful weekend here at COTA. And he is now in 10th place with 56 points.
Yeah, that battle for P10 and the drivers is anything but over with. And I think there's like four guys who are like right on it. So that position is one that we'll have to kind of watch, as it'll change probably in our standings as we get closer to the end of the season. As for the teams, obviously going nowhere anytime soon, Red Bull Racing Powertrains has clinched P1 with many rounds left to go. So they are on 706 points. Like I said before, I think we're going to look at the maximum number of points you can score and subtract. And I think that's how you're going to score Red Bull this year. Second place comes Mercedes. They check in 344 points. Third place, not that far behind now, is Ferrari, in spite of all of the issues, 322 points. Fourth place now, we have a new P4. McLaren has now caught and passed for the moment Aston Martin. They check in with 242 points. Fifth place is now Aston Martin. They come in with 236 points. Sixth place is Alpine. They are on the century, 100 even for them. Seventh place, Williams. They check in with 26 points. Eighth place, Alfa Romeo. They come in with 16 points. Ninth place, still upgrades not helping them move forward here. Haas Ferrari with 12 points. And AlphaTauri in P10, almost maybe out of the basement here. They check in with 10 points. So lots still to play for. Big money on offer in the constructors. All right. So you've now heard our takes on this race. We'll now open it up to our favorite segment of the night, the fan email segment. Dee, as you're here, this is your segment. So it's your time to shine. And we'll start off with our normal contributor. She kept up every time there was something new would happen. She would send me another update. So Rachel Fleming, good on you for staying up late in spite of it. But Dee, take it away.
Yes, this is a decently long one, but we will start once again with Rachel Fleming. She says, firstly, hope you guys had a great weekend. It was a great Friday and Saturday for the race weekend, but Saturday was the letdown for me. Oh, sorry, Friday and Sunday for the race weekend. Firstly, that was the sort of finish we wanted. If only we had 2 more laps, Lewis would have gotten Max. Great live from Lewis, to be honest. This is why he's a 7-time world champion. However, onto the sprint. This new format for the season, in my opinion, has not worked at all. I found it tedious and also a little annoying. Some have come up with 2 solutions. My first solution is only have 3 sprints a season and have it in this format. Do free practice 1, 2, and 3, and the sprint is determined by the championship order in reverse. So basically, Logan would be first and Max would be last. Then the sprint results would determine the grid. Would mix it up a little, but again, only keep it to 3 weekends and not places like Monaco. Or my second idea would be to get rid of it altogether and just go back to 3 practice sessions, quali, and the race. 2 sprint weekends in a row was not great to watch from home, of course. I'm sure you guys loved it in Austin. Now, Lewis and Charles might be disqualified. And they have. Well, now I'm glad Lewis didn't win, otherwise it would have been another farce. And now Logan Sargent gets points. Always a bright side, now only leaving Nick and Danny Rick with 0 points. Who wants to start anywhere?
Well, I mean, the Lewis's pain in the DSQ leads to Logan's gain. So that was, I remember thinking about it as soon as I read that we might not be done, I'm like, wait a minute, who is P12? Oh, look at this. So you almost, in a sick way, almost wanted to root for it just because you don't think he's probably going to score points any other way. And for a guy who's had so much and he's so hard on himself, at least he gets to have some nice sound bites for a little bit of time. He has a couple of days that he can kind of maybe relax and just go back to driving the car. Maybe we can salvage something out of this for him. I do still think, though, he's under a lot of pressure, and I'm not sure that he's going to be in that seat after this year, but it's a great moment for him. We've talked about the sprint weekend. Back to back, it's really a tough watch. Being there, it's nice that everything matters to a certain extent and that there's tension throughout. But yeah, that 3.5 hours between the sprint qualifying and the sprint race was just, you didn't need to do that. You could have had one session there. We've all kind of put in our 2 cents as to how we would tweak it. I don't think a tweak is something that's out of order. Now would be a good time. The championships are done. Why not try it? You've got Brazil. Maybe you could throw some ideas around. They're probably not going to do that because I think they're already pot committed to this. But it's too much. It's too much sugar in one weekend, in my humble opinion. I don't have a problem with the format the way that it was before. FP1, FP2, even FP3. There's a natural progression and build throughout the weekend, and I think it works just fine. And Bobby Epstein, chairman of Circuit of the Americas, has said the sprint weekend really did not affect the ticket sales. So they were going to be what they were going to be, whether this was a traditional weekend or a sprint weekend. So it didn't move the needle here, at least, in terms of attendance. Cody, any thoughts?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Cody. If you have anything you want to add.
I was just going to say that I was kind of all for the reverse grid based on championship standings until she said Logan Sargent starting first. And, I like Logan as much as the next guy, Starting at the front of the field, I think could get a little messy, especially if it's happening every, honestly, probably every sprint race this year. So I'm not sure that that's really the best way to go. It would definitely cause for some interesting beginnings to the sprint races. Probably not for the better, though.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I will have to say though, because we haven't really talked too much about Sergeant Williams, but it was even though it wasn't truly on pure pace, I don't think at the end of the day, it is nice just to kind of get that monkey off his back, and hopefully this is kind of a positive for him moving forward. And I just wish that we could have figured these disqualifications out while we were all still at the track. I think that just would have been such a nice moment, I think, for him, especially moving forward. So, despite all the drama that led to it, I'm happy he got those first points, and I'm hopeful if Williams do truly want to stick with him, that this kind of helps him figure this stuff out. And as we've talked and you've talked about so many times, Andy, like the big thing for him is just we don't want to be calling his name. And I think he did have a relatively clean weekend, a very kind of slow weekend, but for the most part, clean. So I think he's, at least this weekend, I think was a step in the right direction for him. So if we're really truly looking at him for next year, hopefully he can kind of keep this up for the next 4 weekends here.
Yeah, we shall have to see. So, all right. So we'll move on to our buddy, the Formula, who I've got an interesting story. He's been DMing me about this, so we'll let you read it, and then I'll try to explain what he's talking about here.
All right. So the formula says, that was the closest race we've seen in a while, and there wasn't even a safety car. Mercedes looks to be finding some late season pace. If Sergio loses P2 in the standings, I'd bet my house he's gone. I did see some rumors that Checo might be announcing his retirement in Mexico, but those are just internet rumors. I'll believe it when I see it. I hope you guys had a blast. Hopefully I can join you one of these years, but I'm currently raising 2 tiny F1 fans, one which is obsessed with the Dutch national anthem. Oh, post-race disqualifications. Typical F1. The race isn't over until 4 hours after the last lap wall.
All right. So to explain the Dutch national anthem thing, so he sent us a DM and he goes, I figure you guys would get a little kick out of this story. He goes, my wife and I are working on potty training our 2-year-old. Air quote, real fun. Today he insisted he go to the bathroom all by himself to go do his business. About 2 minutes in, my wife realizes he's humming something very familiar. She got closer and took a video of it and sent it to me asking why does she know this song from somewhere? And then he goes, I about died when I watched the video. He's humming the Dutch national anthem. LOL. This just goes to show how often we hear that song on the weekends now. You do have my permission to share that story. So I wanted to kind of put it in there to say, well, and that's going to be one of those things like Max is going to win. And then the kid's going to go, why did they change the song, Dad? It's not the same song anymore.
And
it's just so F1, ingrained in our brains.
Yep.
Yeah. If Max is winning so much that your kid is humming the Dutch national anthem on the potty, he's winning too much. We need someone else.
Something needs to change.
I thought I would share that. I thought
that my Lord.
Good. Thank you for sharing, Mr. Formula. We appreciate it as always. We talked about the post-race disqualifications. Yeah, it would have been nice if that could have been at the racetrack. But I do agree. This was obviously the closest on pure merit race that we've seen all year without any, huge issues to any car or any yellow flags or any safety cars or any of that stuff. So, yeah, and I do think it's a harbinger of good things for Mercedes. If you're a Mercedes fan, you got to be really, really excited. They're going to get the ride heights right at these other tracks. They're not as bumpy. I think this was a one-off of that type of setup. But if that floor is humming the way that they want and they're going to have a couple weekends to get it right, Brazil could be really fun if you're a Mercedes fan. That's all I'm going to tell you right now. Look out.
Yeah, and I think just Brazil in general always delivers. So I think hopefully with the competitiveness of hopefully to improve Mercedes and McLaren, and who knows, maybe Ferrari figures their life out. Probably not, but we can hope. It could be them against Red Bull, could be a great weekend. So that's always kind of my number one I look forward to throughout the entire year. So looking forward to that. Anyway,
It's bound to be refreshing after Max wins by like 40 seconds in Mexico.
Oh, reality.
let's just hope Checo finishes on the podium and we can kind of have a happy ending there. Because if that doesn't happen, who knows? Anyway, okay, our final fan email is from Jenny Donahue. She says, I was a fan of previous years of the sprint to set the grid, but with a quali. Then a shootout and then sprint, it just seems overkill and lessens the hype and meaning of qualies. Help me understand why we need all three. I can't.
Me neither.
You probably don't. And by the end of the sprint shootout, whenever we've done these weekends, I'm really tired of looking at the mini sectors and the lap times, and you pretty much kind of already know how it's going to really go, because by the time you get to SQ3, it's really a glorified Q3 session. So it's like, this is what it should have been if we didn't screw it up, because we decided to take and make a tossed salad and go like this to the grid. But it's what they're trying to do. It keeps, I don't know if it's affected the TV numbers any better. I thought it was important that Chairman of the Circuit of the Americas says it didn't move the needle, so we didn't necessarily have to have it here. You would have probably still had a really darn good event, and they put on a really good show and did a really good job this year, regardless of whether you had a sprint or not. So I don't know why we need it.
Agreed.
All right. Thank you to everybody, particularly to the Formula. You get the standout award for submissions this weekend. And thank you for always participating, everybody who likes to contribute. And if you'd like to, feel free to just shoot us a DM. We put out a tweet after every race. Even if the cell service isn't working all that great, we try to get it out. So you can be part of the show. Just hop on and send us your thoughts, and we'll react to them. All right. So we will now close the book on that, and then we'll open it up to our weekly awards, and we will start with the rubbish. Dee, I'll let you go first on this one. What belongs in the bin?
So I can never miss an opportunity to talk about the FIA and or Ferrari. Ferrari will come back up later, so this one goes to the FIA. I think, while no issues with the disqualification, I think if you have 2 of the 4 cars you tested a 50% fail rate of a certain regulation, that should extend to the rest of the grid, and we should check from there. Also, maybe shouldn't take 4 hours to get the decision if it's a black and white measurement. So, anyway.
Cody, I like yours here. What do you got?
Yeah, mine is a rubbish award that you may not have known about if you weren't at the track. But my rubbish award goes to, I'm not really sure who this would go to. Organizers, perhaps? People who were in charge of lighting fireworks or deciding where helicopters would be. But right after the national anthem at the track, they shot off some fireworks. And it was really cool. I'm not really super crazy about the fireworks, at that point. It's cooler seeing them at the end of the race, but I digress. They shot them right at the camera helicopter, and we all looked up and gasped and thought for a moment that we might not be seeing a race, because it was a little freaky there for a second. They
didn't even see that
right off of it. It was
It was a cringe moment for sure, because all of a sudden we're looking and we're like, that's really close, and the guy's trying to hover, and then he's like trying to figure out how to put it in gear. Like, can I just move over? Nope, that's not enough. It's still coming. Oh God, now I got to put this thing in gear, which means he has to go down into where the fireworks are going. And so he moves over.
I didn't even see that.
Oh my God, it was definitely. We were all looking at it like, "Are you okay? Oh, please be okay." Oh, that's not.
We were
good.
looking for the flyover that didn't happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there was that.
I
think that's what we were looking for.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I mean, in other races we've seen, a jet or a fleet of helicopters.
Yeah, that's what we thought was going to happen.
Well, that didn't happen, and then they shot off fireworks at the only helicopter that was there. So, yeah, interesting.
Definitely a faux pas. I've seen at least one video online of it. So if you guys are curious, you can look it up on YouTube and find it. But yeah, it's a little freaky there for a second. Definitely some miscommunication.
Yeah, it's a good call out there, Cody. I had kind of forgotten about that, but yeah, it's a good thing to remember. So my rubbish will kind of go out to whatever short-sighted regulations that are still left in this rule book that kind of get exposed when you put them under pressure. again. Can we please have a look at this damn thing? Can we take it apart, look into how teams are going to try to bend or break these rules and figure out a system so that we don't end up with this weird type of stuff where only 4 cars get taken when we could have done all 20, but we didn't have time. Walk and chew gum at the same time. You're some of the smartest people on the planet. We can figure this out. Anyway, all right. So moving now into the analysis paralysis, you could have the guy shooting the fireworks off at the helicopter and this guy too, because somebody didn't, do the analysis and got paralyzed here. But anyway, Cody, I'll let you go first. Who's your analysis paralysis?
My analysis paralysis award goes to anyone who was legitimately considering the one-stop strategy. We did only have one team that ended up following through on that, and that was Ferrari, so I guess maybe this award is directed a little bit more toward them. But even so, with Mercedes considering it on Lewis Hamilton, with McLaren considering it on Lando Norris, as I said before, Andy and I just kind of looked at each other and said, really? You want to do that here? No. So, yeah, that's going to be mine.
Dee, I think we've got who you've got teed up here,
yes.
But
I'm going to push back on the one-stop strategy because, and we didn't talk about it earlier, Tsunoda technically... Nope, never mind, that's a lie. That's a full lie. He would have done a two-stop strategy, but also, didn't get to say it earlier, Tsunoda having enough pace and distance between him and Albon to pit to get the fastest lap, which I didn't even realize was happening until way after the race. That is my little, not dark horse, but kind of honorable mention. Anyway, sorry. But yes, anyway, back to Ferrari being just so... Like, it just should be named the Ferrari Award analysis paralysis here. It is just constant and never-ending. Anyway, we're back here again. Why you throw the car that has constantly been plagued by tire wear issues on a one-stop strategy on a track where the one-stop has never, I don't think, really actually worked. I don't know. Good luck to you guys. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, mine is kind of on your same thing, and it may not have ended up mattering, but when you have endemic tire life issues, in what universe? In the hot Texas sun, does it make sense to hang poor Charles Leclerc out on a one-stop strategy? Like, you'd have been better doing a 3-stop with 2 sets of soft tires. You might have actually eaten something out that way.
And, also looking at, Charles Leclerc is one of the best drivers of all time at one-lap pace. I do not think his specialty is in managing a stint over the long run.
Right.
So let him run as fast as humanly possible for as long as possible. That is where he thrives. Just please, dear God, choose a strategy that makes sense, I beg.
I mean, it reminds me of, as ridiculous as it sounds, but you're almost advocating, do the Fernando Alonso in China from a few years ago with 5 stops, and it worked, and he ended up winning that race. So yeah, you could easily argue that, but yeah, doing what they did made no sense whatsoever. All right, so we will now move into the dark horse of the day. I'll go first with this one. Didn't think we were going to get this when we left the track, but my God, circumstances are what they are. Logan Sargent, man. Oh, say, can you see U.S. points on U.S. soil? Closest we've had previous to this was Alex Rossi in P11 in 2015 at COTA. I looked up that stat, but Logan Sargent gets it done, comes home with a point. Good for you, sir. Hopefully you can relax. Cody, what's your thought?
I thought that there was a lot of good candidates for dark horse for this race. You had partly because of the disqualifications, some decent points being scored by Yuki Tsunoda, Lance Stroll, Pierre Gasly, but I think I got to give it to Logan Sargent because the story of him getting his first point in his home country when it didn't look like it was going to be possible is just too perfect. So yeah, Logan Sargent, dark horse.
Yeah, I think I'm going to agree with Sargent, and I hope this allows him to kind of take a deep breath and move on from here and hopefully do something at least show some of his pace towards the last 4 races and gives Williams a decent reason for re-signing him. But as I kind of said earlier, my honorable mention here is Sonoda, and I also would give an honorable mention to Sainz after his 3rd podium, of which he was not on the actual podium. So it's just a poor guy. It's a given for him.
He's in the right place at the right time.
Yeah. Like I wish they would somehow have done I remember when he did it with McLaren, they actually like did a fake podium where they just had them around. That would have been fun. Had all the Ferrari guys gotten under the podium as they're taking it down, just to film it, and play, somebody get a thing of the Spanish national anthem and play it. But I guess they didn't want to have fun. But or they found out about it way too late. That could also be a problem too. All right, so we will move from the dark horse to the driver of the day. Dee, I'll let you go first on this one. What you got?
I think we're going to have similar ones here. I mean, Max, I think, is definitely a very good candidate, but seeing Norris lead that race, I think he had a great weekend overall, and I don't think that McLaren's pace was as competitive as a Mercedes or Red Bull this weekend by far. So to do as good as he did and vastly ahead of his teammate, which I think that battle has been getting close over the last few races. So to just see him kind of outpace him and again lead those, I mean, it was probably minimum a third of that race. It was just very, very cool to see.
Cody, what's your thought?
I'm going to go with the safe answer here, and I'm going to go with Max Verstappen. The fact that he started back in 6th place after getting his time deleted, and then having to manage a car that was not at its most optimum setup, it seems, and having to manage brake issues. He pretty much ran that race to perfection. Obviously didn't get disqualified, so he gets to hold on to his win. And yeah, we were watching it during the race. He's like a shark in the water. Like, we're watching him slowly catch up to Lando, and then pulling further into the distance, making it look like it wasn't going to happen. And yeah, it just no matter what happens, he's always there. He's always up at the front lately, and bringing home an astounding number of wins. So once again, driver of the day.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very decent argument, but I'm going to go full homer here because I don't know when the last time I got to see my driver leading a race live after the first few laps. So I'm giving it to my boy Lando Norris for the amazing 27 laps in front on merit, and for letting me see that live, and for me being able to share that moment with all of you guys live, which was extra special. So yeah, that was just a lot of fun. Like I said, I'm going to have the image of him coming around 19 right in front of me in P1. You can't take that away. And that win is coming, by the way. It's going to happen. I don't know where. I don't know if it'll happen this year, but if they can make the similar step into next year, will next year be fun? And I think it's going to be fun for a lot of teams, by the way. I don't think it's just going to be fun for just one or two. Like, I'm seeing that 10th of a second amongst the top 4 drivers. That's the harbinger of things to come. So for anybody who wants to say F1 is washed or the sport is done, Red Bull are too dominant, these guys are way, way too smart. They're fixing their problems. They're getting on top of things. Next year could be a whole lot of fun. So anyway, I'll just leave that there. Go ahead.
You know exactly when your favorite team led the race live for you. It was in 2012, which is to say too long ago.
Yes, way too long ago. And for the longest time, I was the guy that was saying the last McLaren win. I think I was there. When Lewis won in 2012 with the move on Vettel in DRS. Long time ago. Good memory. But yeah, this one was pretty good too. All right. So we will need to talk a little bit about predictions, and I'm actually happy to do that. Cody, you got 3 points on the weekend. You did get P1 on the podium. You did get the fastest race time, and you did get the prop bet because Team USA, because of Logan Sargent, scores a point on the weekend. But I ended up taking this weekend. I got 5 points. I got a really good quality lap time. I guess I was like almost within the same 10th of a second. I got P1 on the podium. With the DSQ, I get P2 on the podium. I got the P5 bonus pick again. The DSQ just lined it all up for me because that gave me George Russell. And then Team USA, again, Mr. Sargent scoring a point, gives me the prop bet. All right. Oh, go ahead.
I got shafted is what I got, because if Lewis hadn't been disqualified, I would have gotten P2 and you and I would have tied.
Right.
So Damn it, Mercedes.
As they say, that's how the plank or the cookie crumbles.
Yeah.
All right, it's way too late. So we're just that's probably our cue to kind of head out for the evening. We will turn around. Our final thoughts are: we're going to turn around and head to Mexico. El de los Muertos awaits us. We're going to do a little bit of a preview, so we'll take a break after this is over with. If you're done with the race review, you can hop on out. If you want to listen to Cody and I kind of get into the preview, do a little bit of predictions. Dee, we know, has to get some sleep. She's had a long day. She's got a very early morning up tomorrow, so we're going to let her head on out. But Dee, any final thoughts on the weekend that was?
No, I think just overall great time. Great to see you guys in person once again. And yeah, just it's just such a great experience, I think, being and seeing those cars in person and hearing them and all the above. And just yeah, I just love being at the race and was happy to get to do that again.
Yeah.
Can't
Cody,
wait for
any
the next
final?
one.
Yeah, no doubt. Cody, any final thoughts?
It was a blast. I've had so much fun every year that I've gone to the race. I feel like I'm a little bit of a bad luck charm for Lewis Hamilton because he went in 2016. He won the race but lost the championship. Went in 2021. He barely lost the race and lost the championship. And then I went this year where he barely didn't win the race again and then got disqualified.
I don't think he's going to hold it against you.
It's your
No,
fault.
I doubt it. But he'd have to know I exist first.
That's true. But all right, as we head on out, I guess here's my my 2 cents on it. It's great to be able to share shared passion and to come together to find people in the world that share that same passion and to be able to do it. Dee, it was great to meet your dad for the first time, to talk with him and to spend time together. We'll always have that little corner in the Velocity Lounge where you managed to get the shady spot because you could get there when nobody else in there could. So, but yeah, hopefully circumstances, there's a lot of things that are going to happen, but hopefully circumstances will line up so that we can try to do this again next year. That's at least my plan A as I'm going forward. But we'll have to see. There's a lot of things between now and then. Like I said before, there's a lot of dominoes you got to set up in order to pull one of these things off. But it was great. We were able to do it. Like I said, I'm more than hopeful that we're going to be able to do it again. I actually pulled out my paperwork. I think I have a couple more years than what some other people were saying. But anyway, we'll have to see how this all goes. But anyway, for everybody connected to the show, this is always fun to do. We love to do it. We hope you enjoyed all our pictures and stuff and social media over the course of the weekend. Like I said, we'll get our race start videos and the formation lab videos and all that good stuff posted in the near future. But for now, we're going to head on out. And as always, may all your laps be fast. All right, welcome back. If you managed to stick with us this long, this is now the overtime segment of the Outlap F1 podcast. This will be our actual Mexico GP preview. Why are we adding this to the end of the episode? Well, because we really don't have a whole lot of news, and other than track facts and predictions, we really wouldn't do a whole lot anyway. So if you're sticking with us and you wanted to get ramped up for Mexico, here we go. So we'll drop the green flag. Cody, tell us about where we're going next. The Hermanos Rodriguez track facts brought to us by the good friends at Pirelli Motorsport. Cody, take it away.
All right. I always like saying the name of this track, the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez, located in Mexico City, Mexico. We are going to go racing here. Number of laps around this track, 71. Length of the track is 2.674 miles. That's 4.304 kilometers. Tire selection for this race, a little on the, I believe that's the softer side, C3, C4, C5 tire compounds. Track characteristics from Pirelli. You have a 3 out of 5 for traction, 3 out of 5 for braking, a 2 out of 5 for tire stress, 2 out of 5 for lateral load, a 3 out of 5 for track evolution, 1 out of 5 for asphalt grip, 2 out of 5 for asphalt abrasion, and a 5 out of 5 for downforce. The qualifying lap record here goes to Max Verstappen, set in 2019 with a 1 minute 14.758. And I seem to recall that is quite a bit faster than the cars currently going around the track. Race lap record was set by Valtteri Bottas in 2021 with a 1 minute 17.774 seconds. And most wins at this track on the current configuration goes to Max Verstappen. He has been highly successful here in the past, especially over the last several years. He has 4 wins here, followed by Lewis Hamilton with 2 wins and Nico Rosberg with 1 win. Most constructor wins at this track under the current configuration goes to Red Bull as well with 4 wins. So all of those Max Verstappen victories. And then 3 wins for Mercedes. What's the circuit like, Andy?
All right. It is high up because the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez sits over 2 kilometers above sea level, making the 2.674-mile lap a breathless experience. The track largely follows the outline of the original 1959 circuit, but the main difference is being that the spectacular and particularly scary Peraltada, which means danger in Spanish, corner is now bisected, with the circuit instead winding through the old Foro Sol baseball stadium, providing one of F1's most unique vistas. As for the weather, and the good news is it doesn't look like we're going to have a lot of weather interference. It looks like this is right down the middle. Qualifying, we'll see a few passing clouds, otherwise generally sunny, high 77 degrees Fahrenheit, winds out of the north-northeast at 5 to 10. And for the race day on Sunday, back to traditional format for this weekend. Some clouds in the morning will give way to mainly sunny skies in the afternoon, a high of 78. Winds out of the north-northeast at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Very little to any chance of rain for both days. All right.
I would have killed for 77, 78 when we were in Austin.
Something tells me, I would have too. Yeah, especially that Saturday. Saturday was very toasty. But anyway, so we will hop straight into the soundboard is not being very nice to me on this late evening. So we're just going to put that into the audio. And if you're watching this on video, sorry, we don't get sound on the video tonight. We're going to get into the Choose Your Champion predictions game. We will re-rack and do this again. So we will start, as we are apt to do, with the qualifying pole sitter. Last year was Max Verstappen. I'm just going to lead off with this, and I'm going to say I think he's Thanos. I think he's inevitable. He really likes this track. The Red Bull seems to like this track, unless it's going to go poof, but I don't think it's going to go poof during qualifying, so I got Max on the pole running away with it.
Yeah, I've got a funny feeling that Max is going to be very dominant this weekend, and I think he's going to start that off with a very strong pole showing. So my guy is Max for this as well. It's boring, I know, but it's the easy answer.
All right, so last year's lap time was a bit slower. It's 3 seconds slower than the track record, 1:17.775. I've got him going slightly faster than last year, so I've got him at a 1:17.547. I think we're in pretty much lockstep here. We're pretty close. Cody, what you got?
Yeah, we are definitely close on this one. In fact, you more or less beat me to the time because I was looking at a 1:17.5 something. But to keep it interesting, I went just a hair faster. Now I'm going to go with a 1:17.4 flat. And if this lap time ends up falling between our two guesses, I will be very surprised.
We'll have to come down. We'll have to do the delta to determine who actually gets the point if that's the case. So interesting to see where this is going to end up, if we end up being on it or if we're way, way off, because, sometimes that happens. But anyway, we will now move into the Sunday and the race proper. The 2022 podium featured Max Verstappen in P1, Lewis Hamilton in P2, and a very popular Sergio Checo Perez coming home in P3. Cody, what's your thought on the race podium?
Race podium, I've got, obviously, Max Verstappen winning. Just said he's going to be super dominant, I've got a feeling. I don't think he's going to go poof. If anything, I wouldn't be surprised if, he qualifies very well. Red Bull takes an engine penalty to give him some nice fresh engine components, and then he comes back and wins anyway. I think we're going to see pretty much the podium that would have been from Coda, but without any disqualifications this time. So I'm going to go with Verstappen on P1, Hamilton P2, and Norris P3.
All right. I love your P3, obviously. I don't see it. Something always about this track and McLaren have never jived together. They said sometimes qualify okay. Something weird happens in turn one. I think the closest was Danny Rick trying to send it down in turn one when he was like fourth on the grid. And then he ended up like 12th after that, or he ended up having to retire shortly thereafter. So weird things tend to happen to the MCL boys here. So I don't see quite that good. But I do have Max Verstappen taking the win. I think the Lewis Hamilton thing is real. That dude seemed energized despite the disqualification. I think he's going to come out want to, say, look, I'm back, if nothing else. So I would expect to see him go pretty good here. So I got him P2. And George Russell needs a good weekend. So if the McLarens can't be up there, I'm going to give it to Russell to come home in P3. All right. So we'll move into the fastest lap and, of course, the driver. Cody, what you got?
All right, so my fastest lap driver. Not really too many surprises here, although, he hasn't set all the fastest laps lately. But I do think it's going to be Max Verstappen. And I think he's going to go just a hair faster than last year with a 1 minute 19.789.
All right, very good. I'm going to lock in Lewis Hamilton to take that fastest lap. I don't think that they're going to necessarily need soft tires to do it. I think they will keep Max honest enough to where he'll probably have the fastest lap, but but I've got Lewis Hamilton taking it. 119.955 is my time. All right, so for our bonus picks, I like what Cody went with this. It was his turn to do the picks, and he goes, let's pick positions we hardly ever go for. So he has selected P13, P14, and P16, which is usually not what we predict. So I'll go first with these. I figured we had to have an Alfa Romeo in here somewhere, so I'm going to give this P13 to Valtteri Bottas. P14, I don't see it getting a whole lot better for poor Daniel Ricciardo, even though he sometimes does go well here. It's a tough ask. It's a very, very tough ask, especially given the form of the AlphaTauri car. So I got him coming home P14. And Logan Sargent, I think he will finish this race. I don't know if he will be much better than that. Probably will have a couple DNFs. So I think he'll maybe push up all the way to P16.
All right. I'm going to go with Lance Stroll for P13. I did like his showing at Coda. I'm thinking it might be a little bit of a one-off. I think he'll at least make it out of Q1 this time, though, so that'll help him get up into this P13 position for Lance Stroll. I've got Zhou Guanyu coming in 14, so I've got my my first Alfa Romeo, and then for P16, I'm going with the other Alfa Romeo, Valtteri Bottas.
All right, very good. And personally, I hope they go better. I would like nothing more than to see Alfa Romeo get a little bit more competitive, but unfortunately, I think the data kind of doesn't lie. So I think that's probably where they're going to be. All right, so for our prop bet, as we're going to Mexico, does Team Mexico get to see its hero? That would be Sergio Perez on the podium. I think we've already kind of predicted this, but you can hedge. You can always do the Deanna hedge where reality can suspend itself for purposes of your predictions. But I'm not going to go there. I'm going to say no. I don't think Sergio is going to have enough. The form right now just isn't there. He's probably the luckiest man in the world that Lewis Hamilton got disqualified. I don't think he's going to roll double sixes twice in a row. So I don't see it happening, but it would be fun if it did.
Yeah, sadly, I don't see it happening either. I would love nothing more. It's always fun to see drivers, succeed at their home races, get on the podium. Everyone is always very excited. But with how Checo has been struggling in the car lately, it's been quite a few races since he looked like he was even, going to possibly be on the podium. So sadly, I don't think he's going to be able to pull it off here.
Yeah, well, we wish him the best nonetheless, even though we don't think he's going to necessarily get there. In terms of your times, your session times for this weekend, see your ESPN network of families for mainly, I think most sessions will be on ESPN2. I think the race itself will probably be on big ABC. But ESPN network or F1 TV would be your places where I would look for the sessions during the weekend. They're kind of going to play around a bit with the networks simply because Saturday's a big college football day, and that's what ESPN does. So practice 1 kicks off 2:30 p.m. Eastern. Practice 2 kicks off 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern. So little bit of primetime Formula One for you. Practice 3, 1:30 p.m. Eastern, and the qualifying to follow at 5 p.m. Eastern, so 4 o'clock Central here. And the race kicks off 4 o'clock Eastern, 3 o'clock Central. There will probably be build-up on ABC or ESPN. It may have to move over from one to the other. Keep tabs on our social media. I'll do my best to try to update that as we learn more. Sometimes they like to say they're going to be on one network and then they flip them on me, so I don't want to give any bad information here. All right. Cody, any final thoughts before we head on out for the night? Appreciate you hopping on for a little bit of overtime as we set the stage for the Mexican GP.
No worries. I guess I know that the drivers and the teams aren't such a big fan of the triple headers because they gotta move from one place to the next so quickly and tear everything down and get it reset up, and then they just got to do it all over again. I don't mind, as a fan, the odd triple header because I get my fill of Formula One. So especially since we're coming up rather quickly here to the end of the season, and then we're going to have a whole bunch of months off where I'm going to be doing nothing but watching like old historic Formula One videos to get my fill. I'm happy that we got this triple header, so I'm looking forward to Mexico. I think it's going to be really exciting, at least for a lap or two until Max takes off in the distance, as he tends to do here. But I'll be there for it, or I'll be there on TV watching it on TV this time. Won't actually be there for it.
I would be damn impressed if you were able to parlay that and do the double here. But
oh my gosh, I don't think I've got enough juice for that.
Likewise, that would be a huge ask. But anyway, to the life we wish we could lead, but aren't probably going to. But anyway, that's not either here nor there. Enjoy your F1 in regular time zones this time. Like I said, second of the back-to-back. We will be back, we think, on Sunday night. Maybe just be me and Deanna. It might be the three of us. We're not exactly sure. We're going to play this one a little bit by ear. The timings are a little bit weird for us to set the stage, so I got to put together agendas and results and all that other stuff. And Lord help me if there's a post-race thing again. But anyway, we will do what we always do. We'll move like water. We'll definitely get stuff out to you. Keep tabs on our social media as the episode will come out. Again, appreciate you hanging on this long. Once again, we're happy to have Mexico. It's going to be fun. There's going to be that dude with the skull hat and the weird green eyes. So I'm all here for it. So anyway, we'll see you hopefully on Sunday or maybe Monday or whenever we do this. But as always, again, may all your laps be fast.